Welcome to the only show bringing cops and the community together for some real talk and some real listening. This is uncut. This is uncensored. This is Black and Blue Live. Welcome to another edition of Black and Blue Live. How you guys doing out there? My name is Dale. I'm the host. Here's my co-host over there. No, over there. Yeah. Kind of, yeah, there she go. Everybody say, what's up, Lizzie? How you doing? Long time no see. Oh, what happened to your audio? Hold up. This happens every single time. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. And boom, there you go. You are live. Say something.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Hey,
all
we
right.
got you.
Yeah, he be trying to play me. It's Black History Month. Give me my voice.
Yes, I got to make sure I get the last word in. How you been?
I've been really good. I've been good. I'm excited. I'm thanking God for health and safety and security of family. So, and celebrating Black History Month. So,
yes, today is the last day. Yes, I'm good. I'm excellent. You know, trying to get this pod going and everything. I'm blessed. Thank God for that, and thanking God for health and family and all that. So, thank you. Appreciate it. Haven't seen you in a minute. So last show we had was a Valentine's one. I think you were out with the loved one, and I was here holding it down. Valentine's. Yes, I was holding it down, so it's all good. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Yeah, thank you everybody for joining us here live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Periscope. Send in your comments, your questions, all that. We got a real special show. But like Lizzie just said, it's the last day of Black History Month, and I just wanted to acknowledge that real quick because, you know, every day is Black History as far as I'm concerned. But since we're here, why don't you just tell me a little bit about, maybe somebody that inspired you as a Black young, lovely woman growing up.
Oh, Harriet Tubman, hands down. Harriet Tubman was definitely one of my heroes. She rose, and I'm super excited that recently they revisited her history. Of course, Hollywood has its spin, but just really highlighting not only was she just courageous, but an abolitionist, and she worked for our nation, served our nation as a spy, as a war hero, not losing a battle, being an amazing conductor of the Underground Railroad, and actually eventually getting a home in New York that is still preserved today. And on that property, she even continued her legacy by building a home for the elderly, making sure to go back and get her family members. So just the integrity of someone who definitely reminded people that it's easy to say, just give it a few more minutes or wait, when it's not you that is the currency, or you suffering. And we see how cyclic it is now a lot of times with that. So definitely Harriet.
Yeah. Definitely Harriet. Yes. And there's a lot, there's a lot in my life that, I like Malcolm and Martin, and also Mr. Thurgood Marshall. He argued in front of the Supreme Court for us to get the right to be able to be integrated in schools, and not for that, maybe I wouldn't be here where I am today with my education, and you as well. We both got some good educations, and he was a part of that. So I appreciate that, what he did for all of us. And speaking of law, that's what today's topic is. We're going to discuss the criminal justice system with three amazing guests here, and let's bring them on. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the U.S. criminal justice system, and be sure to send your comments and questions. Yes, our first guest here, she is a district attorney an assistant district attorney with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office in Georgia. Everybody, please help us welcome in Simone Hilton.
Hello.
Welcome, Miss Hilton.
Glad to be here tonight.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Our next guest here, he is a judge in the Circuit Court in Dane County, Wisconsin. Everybody, please help us welcome in the Honorable Everett Mitchell.
Good evening, everyone.
Welcome,
Good evening,
Your Honor.
Glad to be here. Yes.
How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, man. Glad to be here with y'all in Frosty, Wisconsin.
Yes, frosty it is.
It's
Yeah,
cold. It's cold up here.
yeah, we out here in Cali, so
Thank
I'm
you. Thank you.
frosty.
Thank
I'm
you for that. I
frosty in my
appreciate that.
studio. Yeah.
I appreciate you reminding me of that with your air conditioning.
All right. Yes. And our third guest here, she works in the office of the criminal federal. I'm sorry, what was that? The federal defender. She is also out in Pittsburgh. Everybody, please help us welcome in Miss Malakia Contrice. Hello now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Glad to be here.
Office of the Federal Public Defender.
So excited.
Yes. Glad you can make it.
Happy to be here.
Yes. So let me bring everybody on. Here we are. Everybody, there's our discussion for today, discussion of the U.S. criminal justice system. Everybody watching this online here, make sure you send in your comments and questions for the panel to answer, and we will make sure we get those on. Real quick, I want to, before we get into our discussion, I want to bring everybody real quick and just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and so we can get your credentials here. Ms. Hilton, why don't you tell everybody about yourself?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Simone Hilton, and I have the honor and pleasure of serving as a Deputy District Attorney in the Fulton County District Attorney's Office here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I serve in our domestic violence unit. I am originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but kind of trekked my way down south. I am an HBCU graduate. I graduated from Howard
Hey.
University. From Howard University, and also from North Carolina Central University. So I'm a double HBCU graduate, and I just can't wait for us to have this discussion about the criminal justice system.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Yes, love it. And Judge Everett, Judge Mitchell, tell everybody about yourself, a little bit about your credentials there.
Yeah, I am a Dane County Circuit Court judge here in Dane County, Wisconsin. I've been elected since 2016. I'm also the senior pastor of a congregation here, Christ the Solid Rock Baptist Church. So I have two jobs. I went to graduate of Morehouse College, then eventually, then eventually went up to Princeton for seminary, and then finished up here at UW Law School, and have been here since that time. I am married to a Howard graduate. We met in law school here at Wisconsin.
Right.
So, you can still find love in Wisconsin, black love.
Yeah.
And so I'm just excited to be here. I am the presiding judge of our juvenile division, and I'm a former prosecutor who prosecuted domestic violence. But I went to law school to be a public defender. So I've had a crazy path to this place of being on the bench. So I'm looking forward to this conversation tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. And Ms. Contrice, tell everybody about yourself and your credentials real quick.
Hello, everyone. Again, I actually went to law school in my second career. So I had done 20 plus years of HR, fiscal management, things such as that, and didn't go to law school until later in life. I won't say how old, but I will say it was over 40. I went to law school at University of Dayton School of Law. They had a wonderful 2-year program where you started in summer and went through for 2 years and graduated. From there, when I started, I went to law school so that I could end human trafficking everywhere. And as we know, that didn't happen. But as I got into law school and I started really understanding systems and systemic issues, I realized I was much more defense oriented, and then went on to get a Master of Laws at Northeastern University in Human Rights. Did a lot of prisoners' rights, poverty law, education law, those sorts of things, but knew all along I would end up in the area of death penalty defense because I am against the death penalty and I wanted to have a voice in that area of law.
All right. Thank you for joining us in this conversation today. Okay.
I also teach racism in American law, so I wanted to make sure people knew that's the other interest of mine.
All right. So thank you
so
for joining
excited.
us. Yes.
I need to get your syllabus. I taught that class for UW Law School, Race, Racism, and the Law this past semester. It's pretty interesting.
It is.
And it's much needed,
amazing.
much needed conversations right now in 2021 leading from what 2020 was all about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Exactly.
All right.
Do you all feel that within your colleagues and maybe, I guess, kind of your sphere of influence, that the conversations of implicit bias or systemic racism are met with immediate, like, kind of resistance, or have your offices kind of really tried to open those doors to begin those conversations? Most recently, I'll just say, with everything going on and the reimagining of justice and defund movements, do you guys find that happening at all? I see Miss Catrice smiling.
I so in our office, our chief federal public defender is a Black woman who was raised by a civil rights activist, and so that was the conversation at all times. So I have to say yes, but that's not been, of course, historically my experience. So I'd like to hear more what um, you all have to say.
So I would say, being here in Georgia, I've had the honor and pleasure of serving under three Black district attorneys
Mm-hmm.
here in Georgia, and one of my previous employer, Sherry Boston, the DeKalb County District Attorney. She We had implicit bias training for the entire office, not just attorneys, but the entire staff. And I know that's something that wants to be implemented by my current boss, Fonnie T. Williams, who's the district attorney of Fulton County. So it's definitely important and at the front of the minds of the leadership for which I've worked for. But I've also been blessed to work for Black district attorneys as well. So my experience is also a little bit different than others um, across the board.
Right, right.
Yeah, you can imagine that most judges don't see themselves as being saddled with implicit bias. So it is probably a lot harder to engage that conversation with judicial branches, because they just, they just don't always think that that is a part of what influences their decision making process when they're sentencing people or making decisions on everyday people's lives. I, of course, disagree with that. And so I've tried to, keep that before their forefront of their minds, and in highlighting the practices that demonstrate that we are living all of the dysfunctions of implicit bias throughout our entire system.
Yeah, yeah. I see that. I see that. So where you guys, we talked about where you guys went to school and where you got your law degrees and all that. What was that journey like for you to enter law? Was it always something that you wanted to do, first of all, so we can get deeper into this conversation? But what was that journey like for each of you?
I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I never thought I wanted to be a prosecutor. Like, this was not in the plan. But here I
Yeah.
am, 11 years in the game, and I say God saw a different plan for me than I
Uh-huh.
saw for myself. I thought I was going to be a big corporate lawyer, sitting up there making a whole bunch of money, and God was like, "Nah, ma'am, you're going to be doing prosecution," in which I fell in love with, and I really have found what my passion is really having Black lawyers or law students consider a career in prosecution, understand the importance of the power that we hold as prosecutors. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But I think this was definitely a faith journey. And I'm just glad that God brought me to this space that I'm here now.
Yeah. Malachi, I saw that a couple posts that you had where you were mentoring a bunch of law students on how to enter the system and what they should and should not do. Do you do a lot of that with the minority applicants as well, or prospective law students?
So the formal mentoring that I do is with the is in conjunction with the Black Law
There
Student
you go.
Association at my alma mater. So I'm my space for that is Black law students, and then I have informal kind of organic mentoring, and all of them are students of color or aspiring students of color. So yes, I take anyone under that wants any person Black that wants to go into the law. I'm leading them.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And Judge Mitchell, I know it's kind of you can't just mentor other lawyers or what have you to be judges. You got to be elected for that. But do you kind of mentor them in the law profession to get into law, whether it be prosecution or defense?
Yeah, I do a lot of mentoring with with the University of Wisconsin Law School Black Students Association. I spend a lot of time with the students, especially the ones who are getting ready to graduate. But I do a lot of my community outreach that I do as a judge. I spend a lot of time in the community. I'm in schools all the time, middle school, high schools. I'm trying to encourage the young folks to do that. I have one special thing that I do when I go to speak to kids. I take my robe with them, and then I'll come out and I ask them questions like, who wants to be, what do you want to be when you grow up? And kids never want to be a judge. So then I'll ask them who wants to be a judge, and I'll take my robe and I'll put it on them. I'll zip it up. And especially for the for our African American young girls, since we had never had a African American woman serve as a judge, I used to always tell them, y'all will be the first ones, and then you can come take my job when you get ready to graduate from law school. So I spend a lot of time, giving that up, and that's one of the reasons I even stayed as a pastor, because I wanted, even after I got elected, I wanted my young people to know a black judge as they continue to grow up. I didn't like the narrative that people didn't even know what a black judge was. So I said I'm going to stay as a pastor so that all my kids can know at least a black judge and see a black man in that role, being committed to community and to my job at the same time.
Yes, yes. Love that. Love that.
Did you all in your journeys have a mentor or have someone that helped you along the way in this? Because from the attorneys that I know, it's a very stressful kind of education system, especially when it comes closer to the bar. What were some of the people who helped propel you or kind of keep you along the way and things like that?
Go ahead. Somebody jump in there.
Anyway.
So I definitely had mentors along the way in law school, as well as just now in my career as I make decisions moving forward. In law school, probably I wouldn't call him a mentor, but my best friend was the person who encouraged me to get through the bar, because the bar is a stressful time for any law student. Those 3 months between graduation, if you decide to take the bar immediately after graduation, those 3 months can be pretty stressful. So you just need a support system that's going to be there for you. My family was definitely a support system during that period of time, and many of my friends. But even as I've been just going through the process of growing as an attorney, I surely have mentors who I reach out to, who I talk to about the pros and cons of whether or not I should take a job, leave a job, take a different opportunity, and just kind of help you and guide you. I think we continuously need mentors. And then I also try to be a mentor to others too, because I want to pour into others as much as people have poured into me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you all feel?
No, I was about to say that I think as a judge, that's probably one of the areas I've struggled with the most, because, when you come to the bench, it's already so few of us in this process, and it's even fewer when you come to the bench. And then, I came to the bench with a very activist orientation. So, I came from the streets protesting Black Lives Matter, shutting down streets. And then when I took the bench, I brought that with me. And so, I wasn't going to be the kind of guy who just kind of, change my voice and become all niceties just so they accept me. I was going to be my true self. I was going to bring my authentic self to it. And you just realize that there are not a lot of people who bring their authentic self to this position, right? I'm going to be my black self with my beautiful black wife and my black kids, and I'm going to be who I am in all that space. And you just realize that you have to. Sometimes, this is my favorite quote. I'll say this: do not follow the path that has been given. Instead, to go to where there is no path and leave a trail. So, even though I didn't have a lot of mentors in front of me, I see myself as blazing trails. So a lot of young people, especially lawyers who are interested in this, can see that you can be your authentic self and still love who you are, love your people, and still be at this level and represent the intelligence that all of our communities have brought to this place. So,
yeah. Right. What is the role of a judge typically in a courtroom setting? Just for our audience to know.
A judge really is the one who makes the decision maker. It is the one who makes the decision when there's conflict about what two sides are can't figure out how to negotiate. And for me, I'm the presiding judge of our juvenile division. So I'm responsible for our system. that oversees children who are released, or children who are removed from their parents' home, as well as young people who commit juvenile crimes. So overseeing that entire system means that I have responsibility of trying to make sure that these young people who are coming through our pipeline get the services that they need. So that means in some ways you're looking at individual cases, but in some ways I have to step back and look at the entire system and say what are the injustices being done to these young people. And so even as a judge, one of the first things I did starting out was I took handcuffs off of young people. I couldn't believe they're bringing in all our black, brown, low income white children in handcuffs for no damn reason. I was like, no, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I shouldn't have said that word, but they were bringing them in for no reason. And all it was doing is feeding in the perpetuation that these young people are nothing but many criminals, rather than
Right.
seeing them as children. And I chose to see them as children, my children. They look like my children. They look like me. And so it really is about not only dealing with the individual cases, but also thinking systemically, what could we do with this power so that we don't have to see the same type of trudge toward adult incarceration in lives of young people.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. And what's your thought process on that, Ms. Contrese, as far as our juvenile system, our you work in the death penalty phase of our system. What's your thoughts on what our system has become and what it is today?
So I really liked what you said, Your Honor, about the pipeline and the institution and the systemic implications of your decisions, especially as it relates to children. I used to call it the school to prison pipeline, but I now call it the cradle to prison pipeline.
Mm.
At the birth of a Black child in the hospital is recorded in jails, private prisons record those births and prepare a place for them in the institution of incarceration. So the and I can tell you that I've not had a client in my care that has not been on a prong in that pipeline from birth to now.
And I call that one, Ms. Cantrice, I call that, I had to redefine it as a judge. I would say it's the child welfare to juvenile delinquency to adult prison pipeline. And where
Absolutely.
we're passing traumatized children from one system to the next without treating their underlying trauma, and then act surprised when they end up in the adult incarcerated system without receiving the services. I mean, Elizabeth talked about the fact of human trafficking. I'm seeing my young black girls getting ran from one pimp to the next, and people are like, we need to lock them up for stealing stuff out of a Walmart. I'm like, I'm not locking this child up. I'm getting her some help.
Yep.
But that's the mentality, right? We value the property that somebody takes from Walmart more than the bodies of these young babies that are being abused by the adult criminal men who's engaging in these actions.
Absolutely. So
Absolutely.
I started law school because of having worked with survivors of domestic human trafficking, with the average age of entry as 11 years old, and usually sold by a parent or a family member.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
We've had the benefit of working with absolutely has the understanding of a lot of our victims and not the problem. That being said, Ms. Simone, do you find that you said that you felt that you were propelled to this call and there's a weight to the mantle that you have in terms of a prosecutor? How do you feel that that plays into this conversation with knowing that there are systems in place? Do you feel that there is a kind of like a balancing act that you have to do when you're reviewing your cases and things like that?
Definitely. When I go into looking at my cases, I go in there with, well, I'm a black woman, right? I'm a black. Can you all still hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. So I go in with looking at my case. I'm a black woman with black male members of my family, black young girls in my family, and I look at a system that has not always been fair to black people. And so when I go and I look at my cases, I'm looking at what's fair, what's just, what's balancing, and what is needed. One, maybe to assist the defendant in becoming a better individual, And might not be incarceration. That might be some other man. That might be an accountability court. There might be some other additional services that that individual needs. But I'm also weighing the balance of my victims. In Atlanta, Georgia, I'll tell people all the time, both my victims and my defendants are generally African American, are generally Black people. And so I'm weighing all of that as I go in, and it's a heavy burden to bear, knowing that you have two people's lives in your hands. And I've spent a good number of my career dealing with homicide cases, and child sexual abuse cases, and now domestic violence cases. And that definitely is a heavy burden to bear when you're looking at those types of cases and the people who are coming into the system. And understanding that some of our defendants, like we talked about earlier, have had trauma that has never been addressed. But then my victims also have had trauma that has never been addressed. And so you're trying to balance being a voice for victims, but then also being fair and just to those who have been charged with offenses.
Right, right. So, we all know that assistant district attorneys are overworked and underpaid, right? Cases stacking up. Do you find, Ms. Contrice, that to be the same case as far as public defenders, that they're not getting the pay that they need, that there's not really many that are entering that career and they're overworked as well?
Yes. So the system is just, the American way, in that at the city or county or state level public defender is usually the entry point, and they're usually way overworked, way underpaid. And you don't reach the level of what you're worth really until you get to the federal side, right? But that's the federal government in general. But I will say that the way that I work is I'm in isolated cases where in a death penalty unit, you don't have cases coming in every day. It's a slow, long process. So I don't have to concentrate on 30 other clients when I have 6 clients on death row. I can concentrate on those 6 clients because death is so long and final, and the research and the investigative work that you have to do is so lengthy. What I do find, though, because I'm at the federal level, is that because it went through the state at first, there was not enough time or resources to give a real defense to the client. And that's how I've gotten them after being on the road for 10 years.
Yeah, I can see that. Definitely see that. What's your thought process on that, Judge Mitchell? You think both sides are overworked and underpaid?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I think I think sometimes I see prosecutors who really don't have the time to really give their victims a fair shot. So they're just kind of plunging through cases, and I see public defenders who are either overworked or not trained well, and so that you see people struggle on both sides because of the amount of cases that people are both bringing to prosecute, as well as individuals who are trying to provide defense. When you step outside the private, I mean, like say federal public defender or even just the public defender's office, it's the private bar that is really difficult because I'm not always quite sure that they're getting the adequate defense they need. Because sometimes it's just like lawyers just picking up public defender cases, and whether or not they have the training mentorship to actually litigate a case, you'll see it just look horrible inside a court, or they're just pushing their clients to accept a plea deal when you read the facts yourself and like there is no way that they can take this to trial and get a guilty based on the facts that are being listed in front of me. So yeah.
Well, let me ask you real quick on that. In your role as a judge, do you have any say so on whether or not a defendant is adequately represented on either side or prosecuted? If you can tell that this prosecutor or this defender is incompetent, for lack of a better phrase, do you have any say so on that?
Oh, you got a lot to say so. The moment that people sit down in front of your court and your name is on it, you can do whatever you pretty much want. But the idea is like of a judge is, I feel like it's like Aladdin. I know it's gonna sound stupid when I say this, and I apologize. But I sometimes feel like I'm like Aladdin. I'm a genie I got all this power in the itty bitty little box. I need somebody to ask me to do something in order for me to insert myself into that conversation. So a part of what the struggle is that you're trying to elicit from them, a request so that you can begin to, bring some analysis to this factual because you can't. It's a separation of powers, so you can't just insert yourself. But if by the time they come into my courtroom, if I'm looking at facts, if I'm looking how people are behaving and responding and not, treating people appropriately, I'm going to say something because I have a constitutional right and a constitutional responsibility to make sure that people are getting their amendment rights taken care of in court. So is that due process is very important to me, and I will stop anything from moving forward if I don't think the due process is being given correctly.
And I would
So
say,
how? Oh,
oh, I was just going to
no,
say, and
go
as a
ahead.
prosecutor, as a prosecutor, ideally, so I'm going to say this, ideally, my job should be to protect the process. So as a prosecutor, if I see something flawed, I should be bringing that to the court's attention. So if I see that there should have been a motion filed and defense counsel did not file a certain motion, then I should say to the court, Your Honor, I'm not sure if it's for strategy purposes or whatever, but this motion should have been filed. It has not been. So now I'm putting the court on notice. Now, I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'm putting the court on notice that this should take place. So again, as a prosecutor, that should be what I do. Now, I'm not saying all prosecutors do that, but they should, because our job is really to protect the process, to make sure that the process happens fairly as well. And people, unfortunately, in the past, prosecutors haven't done what they're supposed to do. And sometimes they'll say, well, the defense attorney didn't do it, so I ain't going to say nothing. But honestly, that's not how it's supposed to work. And there have been often times where I've seen defense counsel, or I've seen cases where I think there might be a mental health diagnosis that hasn't been diagnosed. And I'll say, Your Honor, I don't know if this is strategy, but I want to bring to the court's attention that the state was made aware of this. And now the court can inquire of the defense attorney whether it's strategy why they didn't file a motion or whatever the case may be. So I just wanted to add that to that.
Good job. Good job.
How are cases assigned? If you can kind of share that, I know like you're now on the federal side, but I imagine like a lot of times people are like, I want to be a detective, but it doesn't start like that. You got to go through the academy and patrol and things like that. How are cases assigned from homicide or things like that for up and coming attorneys or anyone in general? How is that assigned to people? And how are they given the cases to work?
So it depends on an office. So every district attorney's office may run their operation a little bit differently. I can only speak from the offices that I have been in. I've been in 2 Metro Atlanta offices that generally cases come in from the police department after arrest, and usually the lower level felonies will be handled by attorneys who are younger in their practice, and then the more complex cases will go to the more senior attorneys in the office. And it'll just depend on what courtroom you're assigned to, will depend on what case you may get. So it's very random. It's like they call it the wheel. So as cases come in and get indicted, they're placed on a wheel. In Fulton County, Georgia, we have 15 judges. We have 20 judges on the Superior Court bench, but 15 who handle criminal cases. So those cases get dispersed to those 15 judges. In DeKalb County, it was a little bit different. The cases are assigned once it even comes in before indictments. And then there are 10 Superior Court judges in DeKalb County. And as soon as it comes in, it goes on a wheel, it goes to a different judge. And if you're assigned to that courtroom, then you'll get the case. So it will vary depending on where you are.
Our cases are on the traditional side. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
On the traditional side, our office is divided between the traditional federal public defender and then the capital habeas unit where I am. So our cases, we monitor from the time someone is indicted for homicide and it's death eligible, that it may come to us at some point. And then it's parsed out by the chief. And then on the traditional side, I'm not really sure how they're assigned, but they are as indictments come in and the client has possibly met the eligibility for public defense it's parsed out by attorney and maybe attorney specialty. Sometimes we do get a lot of child pornography because those are federal indictments. And I'm not sure, but I'm guessing there are people who are more specialized in that area.
Got it. And then we all hear about on TV and movies about grand juries for our people because we want to give a framework to everybody watching. What is a grand jury and how do they work in our system?
So the grand jury is just a well, it's the formal way that an individual gets indicted or for a crime. So the quick Cliff Notes version, a person may get arrested. We're talking about for felony charges, but in Georgia, at least for felony charges. And a felony is a crime that you can get a year or more in prison, which is different from a misdemeanor, which is up to 12 months, although it's still a year. We're talking about months versus years.
Yeah.
But when you're arrested for a felony, it comes in from the police. The police have issued either an arrest warrant or arrested someone on scene. At that point, there could be an investigation that goes on, and once that case is transferred to the district attorney's office, then the district attorney will evaluate the case and make a decision on whether or not it should be formally indicted. So even though someone may be arrested, when the district attorney looks at it, they may decide, yes, there was an arrest, there was probable cause for an arrest. However, we don't want to formally charge it. Or they can decide that they want to formally charge it. At that juncture, the case, and there's some nuances there, but certain cases are then sent to a grand jury, which is a private closed jury, except for law enforcement officers. And the prosecutor presents whatever evidence that they have, and then the grand jurors will decide whether or not they will true bill it, meaning they will indict it, or no bill it, which means they feel like it wasn't enough evidence for the case to be indicted. And that at that point, that starts the formal process of trial. And so that's not a trial then. And it's at that point, then the formal charges have been handed down. That individual will then go through a series of calendars until we get to an actual jury trial or bench trial, where those charges will be either put before a jury of 12 or before a judge. And then either the jury will render a decision or guilt or innocence, or the judge will render that decision.
Yeah. You know, you've heard that saying, you can indict a ham sandwich, and that's only because there's no defense in that grand jury room. Is that correct?
Correct.
That is correct.
No, it's just the state, unless there's a law enforcement officer.
Right.
It's a little bit different, but yes.
Right. So since there's no judge and there's no defense in there, what do we think about that process? First, Ms. Contrice, and then you, Judge Mitchell.
Well, as I mentioned, it's a thorn in my side. But my opinion of the process is that there is no fairness in an inequitable room. So if there is nothing to defend, then where is the fairness in that decision making? And it's also secret, so it's not like that information gets to a defense or any of that. And if you've been arrested, that there's a possibility you could be indicted, and in that process, you can't have representation in that room with the grand jury on that case. So my feeling is that it is very unfair. For the person being charged.
Right. And you, Judge Mitchell?
Yeah, we rarely use grand juries in Wisconsin. I think if the prosecutor decides that they have met a burden. When I worked in the prosecutor's office, our edict was, you only charge cases that believe that you could prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Those are the cases that you charge. And so, that's how we started our process when I was a prosecutor here. And so, we don't really have them. We don't use them. We believe that, to Ms. Cantrice's point, that it does create a imbalance of inequity, at least the appearance of it. So we would rather just go through the formal process and let the prosecutor make their charging decision based on the evidence that they are willing to present, and then present that information to to the court as they begin to work through the process.
Got it. So we have some questions here and some comments from Facebook from Leon Jones. We have to change the culture of the system. Transparency will help change the culture. I like what I'm hearing. So appreciate you for your comments there, Mr. Jones. And transparency. That's what it's all about. That transparency. It's not always there in on all sides of the equation, whether it be with law enforcement, whether it be with the prosecution's office, and whether it be with the defender's office. Vivi V on Facebook says, "How do you restore faith in the system when we see so many injustices time after time?" Anybody jump in there?
I will say that as a judge. Oh, we already jumped in on that. We like
everybody wanted to jump in on that one.
Your Honor, go ahead.
No, my sisters, y'all go ahead.
Yes, indeed.
I was going to say, just like we were talking about, I think it's transparency. I think it is really seeing what those cases are. I think that restoring faith in the system comes with electing individuals who are truly dedicated to being transparent and understanding that there needs to be a change in the system. I think that that's one way that we can begin to restore the process.
Yeah. Yep. Ms. Contrice?
Well, I would say first that a system can't fail someone that it was never designed to protect. And so while we are in this fighting as Black people, and other people of color, as while we are in this system working it, if we don't understand that it is inherently unfair at the onset, right? We know that it's not designed to protect us. So we have to make even more the effort to make sure that we are protecting Black and brown bodies in this system. And again, be transparent about that.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. By the time you see the injustices, so many people have rubber stamped that injustice throughout the process. That's why, for me as a judge, I'm very clear about setting an expectation that from the beginning that a case hits my desk to this end, that we are being fair, that we're being just, that we're being transparent, and that we try to be as inclusive as we can about the entire process. Man, listen, I have, we talk about big issues of injustice happening in systems. I remember when I went to go see a juvenile prison for the first time right after I got elected. And I was walking through the juvenile prison, and all these young Black boys had their hair was looking all crazy, was looking all matted and distorted. And I pulled one of the young boys aside, and I'm like, "Yo, dog, why y'all looking like this, man? You can't go to court looking like this. People gonna think you looking crazy, like you don't care about yourself." And the young man dropped something on me I never thought of when we think about the system. He said, "Man, they got a dog groomer in here cutting our hair, a dog groomer." And I said to myself,
Wow.
There's no way in the world that you're going to tell me these young Black boys going to have a sense of pride when they sit down in the chair and got a dog groomer. And so I went and talked to the warden. I was like, "Listen, Black men need to have a crisp line in their head, not no circles. We don't do circles unless they bald headed." And and so I went and recruited a barber to come cut the heads of these babies, so that when they went to court, they had a sense of purpose and dignity and can be seen as young people and human beings, right? So when we think about the injustices of the system, it's not designed. It's designed to see us a certain kind of way. And it's up to us inside the system to make sure that our counterparts who are doing enforcement or incarcerated don't lose the perspective that these are still human beings, despite what they have done, and that if we're going to stop having more victims, we can't keep creating victims at the same time.
Absolutely. And VVV on Facebook says, "Thank you for being great role models."
Thank you.
Yes, appreciate that.
Thank you for saying that. Appreciate you.
Yeah. And they Melva Stennis on YouTube says, "Love the discussion. Very, very informative." I agree. So Elizabeth and I, we are in law enforcement, and we like to think it's not an adversarial relationship between the defense and law enforcement. What do you believe is the role of law enforcement, Ms. Contrese, in our criminal justice system?
What do I believe the role is, or what should it be?
Well, yeah,
Both.
yes, both.
What both. And I love this question, Dale. And the reason I'm asking that is because you made a statement earlier that the system was never set up to be a justice for us per se. So when people are talking about reform or fix, I don't know that you can fix something that was inherently broken when you look at equity and equality. So both, what should it be going forward and what is it now? I think would be an appropriate question or response.
So yes, and I always like to make sure I'm being very clear when I say this, because I do not focus on individual actors anymore in law enforcement, in the judiciary, or in prosecution or defense. This is a system, and the system on itself was created to regulate and criminalize Black bodies. That is exactly what policing was originally designed to do. So that's what it's doing, right? Now we have it's kind of backfiring, because we've now started to make it diverse and have folks of Black folks and of other background, women coming in, but it was all white male at its onset. So that was what it was designed to do. I mean, that is the history of law enforcement or policing, to regulate and criminalize Black bodies. And I think it's doing a darn good job of that. That's what I'll say. I'll say it's doing well at what it was designed to do. As far as reform, we've seen all along the way that there are many incremental changes along the way. We change this when this happens, because we take this individual incident, we change this law when this happens. But what I will say is, you cannot reform the mind of a person who is unwilling to be reformed. So we live in a caste system. We operate in a caste system with white as the dominant caste and Black as the lower or subordinate caste. And if in our minds we are operating all the way indoctrinated into this caste system, if that's not reformed, then no matter how many laws you make, if you don't see a Black person as human, you will not be able to treat them humanely. And if you don't see a Black person as anything other than criminal, then we will always be criminalized for something that maybe a white body is doing that is not seen as criminal, because we don't view it that way. So
right.
That's what I'll say about that.
Okay. Yeah. And I enjoy that response. I respect that response as well. So thank you for that. Mr. Judge Mitchell, I mean, law enforcement comes into your courtroom. Your job, we were talking about warrants, coming through, and the job of a I saw those wide eyes there, and the job of a judge to approve or disapprove parts of warrants. What is your feeling on law enforcement coming in, trying to pass warrants through the system, through your courtroom, so that they can go out and do what they want to do?
Yeah, I think after the death of Breonna Taylor, the no knock warrants became something that we start paying real close attention to, especially with our law enforcement partners. And to their credit, I think that they realized the situation with Breonna's death was not something that law enforcement want to continued as a pattern. So when I start seeing those no knock warrants come through, I would take what I call a Breonna Taylor look at these. I would have a Breonna Taylor lens on my on looking over the facts, and I started just sending warrants back saying, listen, I can't tell that this is what apartment this is. There's no picture on this. There's no numbers. How do I know this is that matches the description? You need to go back. You need to tell me who's in that house, how long they've been in that house, where the kids at, who has guns, who don't have guns, what you anticipate. And, elevating what I think is what law enforcement should be responsible for when they get ready to execute these type of warrants. And I don't think that, at least in my community here, that there was a big resistance to that. I think some of them appreciated it because that's a blind spot for a lot of them. And it really takes, that kind of approach of being aggressive with them and resending them back and have the courage to say, I don't like this, you need to go do something else with this and bring it back to me, and we'll look at this a little differently. But I'm not ripping them up and then paste it back together for them. But I will tell them that yes, this isn't adequate enough for me to feel comfortable with giving you the power to then go into these people's home. You got to give me a little bit more of that. And it not only protects somewhat the process, right? I think Attorney Hilton said it's the process, and we need to be protecting the process, the due process. And whoever they arrest, maybe they will be prosecuted them to the extent of the law, but the process has to be done a certain type of way. And it's up to us, especially those judges, not to just give a pass just because we want the law enforcement endorsement when we run for our reelection again. It's important for us to make sure that this individual case is given the attention it needs, and we stand on justice and not reelection.
Yep. Go ahead there. You sound like you wanted to say something there, Simone.
Oh no, I was going to say I agree. Again, I tell people all the time that I think there's a thought process and valid so that prosecutors and officers are in bed with each other and know we work together because that's how we get our cases. But a good prosecutor should understand that at times you may have to train police officers. And I tell people all the time there might be a time where there's you get a police report and that stop looks a little like, no, I don't think that was a valid stop. That as a prosecutor, I should say, Mr. Officer, thank you for getting the drugs off the street, but today this defendant is going to get let go because this was not an appropriate stop. Like this was not this was a pretextual stop, and let's talk about it. Right. Let's talk about why this was pretextual. And I think as prosecutors, you can't be afraid to have those conversations and have some education and do it in a way that's respectful. But that is my job too, like to also say to the law enforcement officer, this isn't appropriate, this wasn't proper, and making sure that we protect defendants' rights as well. It's not solely to the defense attorney, but as prosecutors, I should be making sure that those rights are protected as well.
Yeah, indeed. And I always say that officers hate a defense attorney until we need one.
Every time.
They say that about lawyers, period. Everybody hates lawyers till you need one.
Yeah, no doubt.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tanya Rivers on Facebook says, this is very informative and powerful. Thank you for sharing your stories and points of views. We appreciate your comment there, Ms. Rivers. Thank you. Next, what sort of positive impacts have you seen in your positions through your career, specifically impacting African Americans through your courtroom or through your caseloads? Go ahead there, Simone. Go ahead.
I can say for me, the positive impacts, I can't tell the amount of time where I've had victims who said to me, thank you. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for believing my story. Thank you for believing that this happened to me. And to me, that is enough. And these were times where I might have went to trial and it wasn't a guilty verdict. It was a not guilty, but someone believed what happened to them. And that's success to me. And that is being able to hopefully get that person, not necessarily closure, but some type of part of that healing process for them to get to their next step. I think that I've had just the opportunity to, people like, when they talk to me on the phone, they're like, oh, you Black? Oh, there's a Black prosecutor? Like that idea is foreign to them because you don't see this on television, right? You don't see Black prosecutors. And they're like, I'm glad you Black. Good, bad, or ugly. And I think that sometimes that gives them a level of comfort to be able to discuss certain things with them. So that's been, I think, what my positive impact has been. Just with the community and the people that I serve.
Yep. And I know, Ms. Contrice, you work with death penalty cases, so I'm sure you've had a lot of positive impacts. Talk about one.
I think, so what I remember distinctly is the first client that I had in this office that I'm in now. And the first time I met their mom. So my role is very family oriented. So I'm like the liaison. I'm investigating their life history in generations. So, but when I first met, it's not, a lot of people call me Mally. So I talked with her on the phone when I was going to meet with her. Um, and before I met with her, we spoke by phone only. So I'm sitting in the restaurant where we're meeting, and she and her mom, it's his maternal grandmother, come in, and it's just me and another family in this restaurant of seven white family members. So it's just me and that person, and they're looking around to in that family, looking around because they've never had Black representation for their son and their grandson who's been on death row for 7 years. So for to see the look on their face, and then the tears and the thankfulness once we met and had a conversation, and still we're still, it's like an immediate bond and closeness and trust. So I think that is one of the best feelings, is to represent and meet with and be on the side of people who have been dehumanized. I mean, by the time you're on death row, you've been created into a monster, and then you're in a cage, and you can barely be out in the sun. So to see the relief and the trust on a family member's face who's facing that their other family member could be sentenced to death or could be executed, they've already been sentenced, is probably one of the most positive impacts I can think of.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think every time I started to ascend to the bench, and then they say all rise, and then they see my black face come through that door, they were like,
Hmm.
"What?" You know what I'm saying? It's just,
That is so
and I
awesome.
think I
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
I think a lot of the mothers are very grateful, and so sometimes the mothers will cry because they're like, at least my child is going to be if my child is going to be in the system, at least they in the hands of this judge. And so I mean, like I think I said on the podcast, the show with Rodney and them the other day. I said, man, I even grew my hair out. Like I used to have a low cut, Morehouse cut is what I call it, with a nice fade taper. But when
Or
I
half
started seeing,
man.
when I started Morehouse, man. But when I saw the kids come in, and people be talking about y'all need to cut their hair, I'm like, no, don't let them cut their hair. It's beautiful, grow it. So I started
Hmm.
growing my hair so they won't be talking to the kids like they talk. I'm like, no, their judge look like this. I look fine. They look fine. Stop messing with. The least I'm concerned about is their hair. I want them to be able to have a
Ju-
future, and their hair is the least of what I'm worried about.
Judge, keep it as long as you can, because mine's all gone. So
I
I
am.
got you.
Trust
I
me. I done
got you,
cut
yeah,
that
Dale.
off
I
long
got
time
yeah,
you.
ago.
yeah. Okay.
Do not do.
No, please,
Don't do
no,
that.
no. Hey, real quick, Aldana Wilson on Facebook says this discussion is so important. Thank you. So proud of all of you and what you do for sharing your perspectives. Thank you. We appreciate you as well.
So, kind of piggybacking off of that, Your Honor, do you find that operating in the juvenile system as opposed to the adult system, that you have more leeway to bring balance? And I don't want to say ethics, but to bring balance in how the courtroom is run, where maybe in the adult system it's a lot, maybe more red tape, or kind of a culture with less grace, is maybe do you find the difference in that in between the two court systems?
Yeah, I think being a judge over the process of chips as well as juvenile allows for me a lot more flexibility. So I get a chance to not just be a judge. Hell, I'm a father, I'm a friend, I'm a mentor, I'm a pastor. I get to bring all of my personality to the conversation that I'm about to have, to try to make sure I don't pass them on to this next level. And when I couldn't get people to buy into what I was doing, I even went to a film producer, and we made a film, you know, uh, and we addressed issues of child welfare and juvenile delinquency to adult prison, because I needed to give transparency of this system because it's so closed off. I think at least on the adult side, you at least get people who can see it, in the children's world, you don't get to see it. And I think that's why
Mhm.
it has been so pervasive and unjust toward folks of color, because nobody sees it, nobody analyzes, nobody can critique it. We have no advocates, nobody's advocating for children. And so, especially these children. So for me, I had to expose it. And so, I brought it, I got a kid, he was so courageous. He let me bring a camera in on his case so that we could film his life so that people could see it for what it really was. And by the time we exposed it and let people see it, people were just shocked. They're like, I can't believe we treat children like this. And I would say, no, we treat Black children like this. This is
Mm.
exactly what we do. And this is exactly why these kids end up in these prisons, is because y'all been treating them like this for years. And then when they get in trouble further, you want to point the finger at them and not realize you had a role in this creation of what they do or don't do. So I got a whole issues of all kinds of systems that let children down, and then we blame them when they 16, 17 years old create new offenses when we have not prepared them with the skills necessary to be competitive in our global world.
So
Yeah.
piggybacking off of that, um, and you said that in order to get to deal with the resistance that you were experiencing from challenging paradigms, you created this film to educate and to make awareness. For Ms. Hilton and for sorry, for Miss Cantrice, what have been your methods in dealing with resistance to those that may not appreciate your way of carrying out the mantles and your responsibilities, because maybe it doesn't necessarily fit the culture of the offices or the norms of the court systems that you're operating in? What have been some of the ways that you've dealt with resistance to truth, in essence, and to realities of the systems?
So
I'll
again, I
let you
tell you
go
my
first.
experience. Yeah, my experience is a little bit different. I work for Black district attorneys, so my office is the ability to not have such a resistance. I don't personally have that issue because um, I think the leaders that I have worked for and want to make sure that we are being fair and just in how we handle our cases and are intentional about making sure that they educate their office on how we move forward in an intentional manner. So I tell people all the time that I tell people all the time that Atlanta and the Metro Atlanta is like the mecca of Black prosecution. In Atlanta, Georgia, we have 20 elected chief Black prosecutors in the Metro Atlanta
Yes.
area.
Yes.
So Georgia is just a mecca of Black prosecutors. And so, and let me say that's the Metro Atlanta area. When we step out a little bit outside of the Metro Atlanta area, it doesn't look like
Mm.
that. But in that Metro Atlanta area, it's just a little bit different prosecuting here because the majority of our chief electeds are Black, and so they are intentional about understanding that these systems were not designed for us, and have designed programs and initiatives to make sure that we're changing the face of what the criminal justice system looks like. And I'm just blessed to be able to serve under leaders who are intentional about creating that change.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm under a leader that is very much about the change as well, but I haven't always been. I will say that the reason why I went to law school and still continuing my education, so I'm in a doctoral program on anti-racist education, and that is because education is the revolution. And just because you don't like how it sounds, it doesn't change that it's the truth. And once you are educated, you must do something differently than you've been doing if it's new to what you've known, right? So I perhaps at the I don't know. I don't want to say risk because I don't really care if people think I'm an angry Black woman, but at the risk of that, I will still continue to speak the truth. I'm actually happy to be called an angry Black woman because we are consistently violated enough to be angry.
Mm.
So I just don't of course, I'm not going down on the office doorways and knocking on white people's doors and saying, you need to know this. I'm not doing that. But anytime I'm speaking about issues of race, and all of our cases are about race, whether it's a white client or a black client, we're a racialized society. I'm going to say the truth about race. And I honestly got myself to a position, marketability wise and education wise, that I can do that comfortably without risking, termination or silencing or some. I'm just no longer going to do that. That could also have a little bit to do with um, almost being 50, where you just are like, this is what I got. This is
This is who I am.
yep,
This is it. This is it right here.
this is
This is
it,
it right here.
and the truth is the truth, and here it is.
Yep. So real quick, we were talking about biases in the criminal justice system. I mean, that's what this whole program is about. Where do you find, in your experience, that black defendants are actually charged or overcharged more than, say, a white defendant? That more black defendants are brought before your court before you have cases where, say, as a white person wouldn't have even been arrested by the police, and when they are, it's the job of the prosecution's office to charge them. So maybe they're overcharged. What is your experience in that? Does that really take place, or is that just a urban legend? You cutting out there, Simone?
I would
Go
say,
ahead.
I would say, in it happens a lot, and I think depending on the prosecutor's office, how they organize, people will present cases to you on an everyday basis, and I think as a judge, I have to be thoughtful about the cases that I'm seeing. So if there's a pattern that's being projected in front of my court, and then they deviate from that pattern, I bring that to their attention. Like, for example, I used to see that they would bring like young white dudes who were like sexually assaulting girls and give them like, a consent decrees, which means the case would be dismissed after 12 months. And then they would bring for first time, but they would bring a young black girl who's first time in court, and they want to have a full disposition on that young girl and put her on some kind of juvenile probation. I'm like, hold up, she may have stole a watch from this place, but this dude just like sexually assaulted the girl and admitted to doing it. So how is it that he get 12 months and then it get dismissed, and you want me to sign off on this plea agreement with this young girl? I said, I'm not accepting this plea agreement. I dismissed this before I put her on some kind of formal sentencing regards to that. No, we got to be fair. And the moment that I brought that to their attention is the moment that they went back and became very conscious about how they presented cases to me. We do realize that most of these cases end up in plea deals. Almost 90 to 95% of them end up in plea deals. So it's very important that whatever plea deals are brought up, that they got to be fair and they got to be equitable across the board. Because if not, they be trying to sneak stuff in, and I'm like, oh no, that ain't that. We ain't playing that game today.
Yeah.
No, you didn't do that. And I have a great memory, right? Because I got a hustle memory. So I got a hustle memory. So I remember stuff that they don't think I'm gonna remember. And I'm like, no, 3 weeks ago you did this. I'm like, like, how'd you remember that, Judge? I said, because I'm a hustler. And this is what hustlers do. You got to remember things, right? You can't make it
I
through.
have my
You can't
money
survive
on
the
time.
hood. Yeah, exactly. You can't survive the
Have my
hood and
money
don't
on
and can't
time.
remember nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
and and I think that's the same. I think that was your question. I had broken up. So, but I think ultimately when I'm looking at cases, or even when I'm telling my team, when you're looking at cases, like, are we being consistent? Even with, and not necessarily the cases, but even like bond hearings and bond matters, making sure we're just being consistent across the board when we're looking at the history, when we're looking at the facts, when we're looking at, and if they're similar in nature. And it's really just educating my team. I tell you, I think assistant district attorneys act from top down, right? The leadership brings down how we should evaluate and look at cases. And so I'm just intentional about talking to my ADAs about how they look at the cases, looking at not just the facts of this case, but let's talk about what else is going on before we make those charging decisions. And so that is kind of how I try to. Now, is it a perfect system of how we do it? Of course not, but making sure that we talk about those cases and how they look at how we bring down those charges.
Yeah. I always want to talk about comparing apples to apples as opposed to apples and oranges. We always hear in law enforcement with these cases that are coming about that, if something were to go wrong and say Atlanta, the cops everywhere do the same thing. And I say, no, you don't know what an officer out here in Cali, where I'm at, where Lizzie and I are at, how to react as opposed to someone in New York or someone in Utah. So the same thing in these cases that are being brought before courts, because we said that DA's offices are, they're segmented. We got this division that handles, these sex crimes. We got these divisions that handles thefts. We it's these divisions that handle, homicides. So maybe when, sex crimes are brought before your court, Your Honor, is by a different set of lawyers that have one set of thought processes, and then when another set of theft cases come before your court, and maybe that's another set of lawyers that have another set of ideas and thought processes. What's your thought on that?
That's not my problem. My problem is about justice and fairness. So if y'all need to figure out how to talk, because one dude came in here and said something else, another person came and said something else. Y'all need to have a conversation. Yeah, y'all work in the same building. Figure it out. Go have lunch. But y'all not gonna allow me to co-sign y'all inequity. That's not gonna happen. So go figure it out. Come back with something that's equitable and fair. Then we can have a conversation. But until that time, I'm not your co-signer. I'm not none of y'all friends. My job is about fairness. It's about justice, and it's about making sure that this process is done right. And if y'all don't have that worked out on y'all system, then that's something that you need to continue to have y'all need to have some in-person meetings to figure it out. Or maybe y'all need to go holler up with Simone down in Atlanta, because they got something figured out that y'all need to replicate wherever y'all are. So yeah. That's just, I'm crazy like that. But I just don't like people trying to push on me they dysfunction. That's y'all dysfunction. That's not mine. So y'all need to figure that out. But I'm not gonna co-sign injustice. That's just not what I do.
It's a problem, but it ain't my problem.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. All right.
He pulled the old school. I felt like my mom was saying, I ain't your little friend to play with. I ain't your plaything. Go figure it out.
No, y'all go figure that out. Y'all go figure that out.
Yes, yep. Indeed. Well, I love this conversation. It seems like the viewers out there enjoyed this conversation as well. I thank each and every one of you out there for joining this conversation today. Is really, really needed. And I'm glad, real quick, before we get out of here, each of you just say something towards to the audience, what you'd like them to know before we get out of here. We'll start with you, Ms. Hilton.
I just want to say that thank you again for having me on the show. This was great. I just learned a lot from everyone, from all of the panelists. Maybe I'm going to have to come out to Wisconsin. Like I said, I didn't know we was out there like that, but thank you, Judge Mitchell, for holding it down. And I just want to say, everyone, just the criminal justice system has not been fair, but know that there are people in the system who are trying to make it a better system for those of us who look like us who are in that system. And one of my goals is really to be fair and just, and making sure that our those who come before me as defendants are treated fairly, and that the victims that I serve have a voice. And so I'm here to serve, and I enjoy this this talk today.
Yeah, indeed. Judge Mitchell.
I don't think I can summarize it better than I think Brian Stevenson has said it in his book, Just Mercy. He said, proximity has taught me some basic and humbling truths, including this vital lesson. Each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. My work with the poor and the incarcerated has persuaded me that the opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. Finally, I've come to believe that the true measure of our commitment to justice, the character of our society, our commitment to the rule of law, fairness, and equality cannot be measured by how we treat the rich, the powerful, the privileged, and the respected among us. The true measure of our character is how we treat the poor, the disfavored, the accused, the incarcerated, and the condemned. So that's what I'm trying to live out in my calling and my mission that God has put me here, is to make sure that the true measure of our character is that how I treat those individuals, not just those with money. And that's what we can change and make this system more just.
All right, that's what's up. Keeping it 100. I appreciate you, sir. And Ms. Contrese, closing arguments.
Thank you for that. So thank you for that. Brian Stevenson is my legal crush. I never knew there was such a thing until I met him. But so thank you for those
He's
words.
mine too. He's mine too. He's mine too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real thing. Legal crushes are real
Oh,
things.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay.
And part of the reason why I'm also into this work. But I would also say, so I have one quote, and that is, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And so what I will say today is that I know that a lot of us aren't involved in law or in systems in higher positions in positions that require more education, simply because we don't have the inkling that it's possible. And so I hope that today, whatever we talked about today and all of our differences of opinions and conversations and differences in educational and career journeys encourage someone who thought that it might not be possible, that it is possible now. That's all.
Indeed.
Yes, I'm
Love
ready
this
to go
conversation.
back to school and get my Juris Doctorate. I'm ready.
You sure
For real.
can.
Go get it.
You
Go
sure
get it.
should.
Go get it.
Go
Go
get
get
it. You sure
Go
can.
get it.
Listen,
Go
don't
get
tell
it.
me that.
Go
Do not
get it.
tell me that, because
Go
I'll
get
be
it,
on you.
man.
Like, when we
Hey,
taking those
where you at?
LSATs?
Hey,
Mm-hmm.
hey, listen, Elizabeth. In Wisconsin, you don't have to take the bar. You just got to graduate.
What?
That's right. From a Wisconsin. Yep. Yes.
Wow.
It strongly
So-
had a lot of us considering moving there.
Yes,
Wow.
you could. I was practicing 1 week after law school. My first 1 week, I was a prosecutor 1 week after law school. No bar.
Now, what's is there a benefit to passing the bar then? It just means you can go to another state or what? In Wisconsin.
You have to be licensed in each state.
State, right.
You have to be licensed in each state. You can get some reciprocity after 5 years, but I mean, for the most part, all of that stress that people have, we didn't have that stress. We were like, shoot, I'm gonna graduate and I'm gonna practice somewhere in the state of Wisconsin. I don't have to take that bar and kill myself kill my whole life at the process, because that was a part of the reciprocity that we have here in the state.
All right. Love the comments coming in on the way out. And Nicole Williams says, this was awesome. Really enjoyed the discussion. Great job, especially to my Bison babe, Simone.
Yeah, that's my crew. That's my Bison babe crew, Howard crew.
My son is a freshman at Howard.
What?
Yeah, he's a freshman this year.
I'm gonna go upstairs and tell my wife that was a Howard grad on the line. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell my Howard sister, all HU. Tell her that.
I'll hate you. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's okay.
All right, folks. I love this conversation. Lizzie, you got anything to say on the way out before we get out of here?
Thank you all so much for being present and represented. And just, I always encourage my nieces and my nephews to watch. And so for them to be able to see someone that looks like them in a place of influence and with integrity. Thank you for fighting even when it didn't feel good. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes.
And thank
indeed.
you all for serving.
Back at you.
Yes.
Back at
Thank
y'all.
You for, thank
I
both
know
of you
that's
for
not
serving.
easy.
Yeah, thank you. One thing I want to do with this show, I think I mentioned this earlier, is that I want to kind of expand the show, even though it's going to be still 90% about law enforcement, minorities in law enforcement. I want to expand to other professions as well. We had some firefighters on a couple months back. I want to get some nurses, some doctors, some unsung heroes. I saw a segment, I think it was on ESPN, about some black skiers that were just inducted into the Hall of Fame. Go figure. You wouldn't have never thought about, some black skiers, but they were trailblazers. So I want to get more of that on, and seeing you guys on here today I really appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today, man.
That's it.
I love
Everybody
that.
Get your stuff, move to Wisconsin so we can become attorneys. Come on now.
For real. Let's do it. I don't know if I could go to Wisconsin though. It may be too
I'll
cold
see
for
about
me,
the
but
snow, though.
thank you for joining us, everybody. We see you in 2 weeks. Same black time, same black channel. Till then, we out. Thank you. Yes, indeed.
This has been a Maitre D Entertainment presentation.